Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
there are too many violent offenders.
What's behind the spike in violence over the 4th of July weekend and what to do about it? We hear from the mayor, police superintendent, and community organizers.
We're doing an inventory of all of our buildings.
After a devastating building collapse, a look at what condos can do to keep residents safe.
They're not the Arlington Heights or Schaumburg or suburban bears. They're Chicago bears.
Given that is a move to Arlington Heights in the Bears' future.
We discuss Chicago's role in the tech world with the incoming president of the Illinois Institute of Technology.
Feelings of patriotism complicated by a history of racial injustice. 3 local Latinos share what it means to be an American from their eyes.
I had no idea of how important and significant this place is to African American history.
And from the Civil War to civil rights and everything in between, even in death, the lives of these prominent Black Chicagoans are educating others. But first, some of today's top stories. After 16 months, Chicago residents can finally enter City Hall during regular operating hours, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The building had been closed to the public for 16 months during the pandemic and operating with limited access when the city moved to Phase 5. Some offices, like the Department of Buildings and Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, are still maintaining limited access. Others, like the city clerk and Department of Finance, had been open with limited access for the last 16 months. The state of Illinois also passed a milestone in the decline of COVID-19, reporting 0 deaths from COVID yesterday, July 5th. The Chicago Department of Public Health reports there have been some of those days in Chicago as well for the first time in 9 months. The state's positivity rate is at 1.4%. The city's is at 0.8%. The state did report 16 deaths from COVID-19 today. And Medicaid recipients who only qualified for coverage because of the pandemic will continue to receive it up to 12 months after it's set to expire. It's a part of a new legislation that the governor signed into law today.
The many Illinoisans who suddenly found themselves in need of Medicaid coverage in the face of COVID-19 now won't find the rug pulled out from under them just because our lives are starting to feel a bit more normal.
And Senate Bill 2294 also provides veteran support specialists and creates a comprehensive statewide behavioral health strategy. It also protects or requires that inpatient status for anyone who is experiencing an opioid overdose, and it covers the cost of kidney transplant medications regardless of residency. And now, Paris, we'll toss it back to you.
All right, Brandis, thank you. It was a particularly violent holiday weekend in Chicago, and that, in turn, has prompted a round of finger-pointing and calls for fresh solutions. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Paris, more than 100 people shot, children, 2 police officers, at least 17 individuals dying as a result. The 4th of July, of course, traditionally a time for flag waving, barbecuing, and fireworks. But unfortunately, in Chicago, it has also become known as one of the most violent weekends of the year. And this weekend's shootings top that even of recent years. There's a horrifying fact that Mayor Lori Lightfoot acknowledged today, saying that some neighborhoods are under siege.
And I want to specifically speak to the victims and survivors. I want you to know that we are doing absolutely everything that we can to stem the violence. I've met with many of you, and I've heard your pain and anguish. And I carry that with me. We must do better, all of us, for you.
Now, it is possible that the stats could have been even worse. CPD Superintendent David Brown describing a concerning case in which a member of the cleanup crew, an employee that is, at a hotel near Navy Pier, it's one overlooking the Ohio Street Beach, noticed a gun in a man's room. Officers investigated and did find a rifle, a handgun, and magazines. An Iowa man with no previous criminal history has been charged with 2 counts of unlawful aggravated use of a weapon. Now, as for the shootings that did occur, Brown says CPD officers did their part, taking some 244 illegal guns off the streets.
We can take guns off the street. We can charge people with murder. But again, I want to ask you a question in this gallery. How many people think it's okay to have over 90 people on electronic monitoring that we've charged with murder released back to our communities?
Putting the blame on the courts is similar to the argument that Brown made Friday to members of City Council when alder people held a special 6-hour-long meeting grilling Brown on the CPD's strategy for preventing a weekend like this one turned out to be. Cook County Circuit Chief Judge Tim Evans has largely been quiet in the face of these allegations from both Brown and the mayor, but today he did release a statement saying looking at individual tragic cases in isolation may contribute to the speculation that releasing individuals before trial, that rather than incarcerating them, whether by placing them on electronic monitoring or other means of supervision, means an increase in crime, Evans said. But speculation based on isolated cases is not the same as reality based on a complete picture, and research has shown that bail reform has not led to an increase in crime. Evans pointing to a study from Loyola University researchers that found the same conclusion. Now, in the face of all of this, alderpersons and community leaders have their own theories and demands. Leaders from Chinatown say their close-knit community is reeling after a drive-by shooting yesterday.
The increased crimes and violence have not only threatened our safety in life, but also caused the mental health problems in our community, including fear, anxiety, stress, even suicide. People are scared of going out, afraid of going to work, go shopping, and go exercising.
She is among the local leaders who are calling for additional funding from the city and the state, also from the feds, to go toward community needs, including mental health. She says the Midwest Asian Health Association could use that extra money to hire a psychiatrist and help with some of those mental health needs. Meanwhile, you have Pastor Marvin Hunter. He's the great uncle of Laquan McDonald, who was killed by a Chicago policeman in 2017, calling on the federal government to send money to Chicago, but not to the city itself. He says it needs to go directly toward grassroots organizations and leaders with whom President Biden himself should engage. Now, the president will be in Illinois tomorrow, but he's heading to McHenry County.
I think that the president should absolutely not go to Crystal Lake. I think he should come to North Lawndale because the crime is at epidemic proportions in North Lawndale. I think that the people of Inglewood and the people of North Lawndale and Humboldt Park and East and West Garfield and Roseland should all meet there. And they should meet there because he's there to have a real conversation about how do we turn this around.
We do plan to cover and be at Biden's visit. Whether reporters will have an opportunity to ask him about violence is unclear, but he is expected to meet with Mayor Lightfoot, and surely this will come up. By the way, Chicago's numbers, of course, shocking, but a superintendent did point out other cities are also seeing what he described as violent crime waves. With that, Paris, back to you.
Amanda, really quickly, just to follow up, the Superintendent Brown said 90 people have been arrested for murder that were out on electronic monitoring?
That was what he said, but he did not necessarily give a time frame for those arrests from my recollection.
And it would have to be over multiple years, you would think. All right, we'll have to follow up on that. Amanda, thank you so much. And tomorrow night we'll have a conversation with Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx and others about the release of crime suspects back in the communities while awaiting trial. And now to Brandis for community reaction to the holiday weekend violence. Brandis.
In Paris, as we just heard, of course, another holiday weekend in the city marred by violence. Here's a bit more of what Mayor Lightfoot had to say earlier today at a ribbon cutting for a new track and field facility and after-school matters site.
We must continue to urge our young people to put down the guns. We have to love them. And tonight and today is about love. It's about making specific investments in our young people. I'm also old school and believe what my mother taught me, which is we love them, but we also must hold them accountable. And we must also show them the way to a different kind of life.
Joining us now are three people working to try and improve communities. They are Tony Salam, Director of Ready Greater Englewood Outreach at Heartland Alliance, which works to address trauma and increase opportunities for young men at risk of gun violence. Liz Dozier, founder and CEO of Chicago Beyond, which seeks to fight pervasive inequities in Chicago communities. Dozier is also the former principal of Finger High School. And Brenda Palms-Barber, president and CEO of the North Lawndale Employment Network. Welcome back. Welcome all of you to Chicago tonight. Thank you for joining us. Liz Dozier, let's start with you, please. How do you think the city and the police department are doing in their response and their efforts to reduce the city's gun violence?
Well, I think that anyone who picked up a newspaper today or turned on the television would say that we're not doing good as a city. The city is not well. We are under siege, and all of us need to do better. And I think that too often times we look at this in isolation of one particular area of the city, for example, the police doing the things that are going to save our city, and that it is not possible. We have to look at this from a holistic perspective in terms of what is going to reduce violence. It means we have to fund and support direct community level programming. We have to support systems level programming, and we have to realize we did not get here overnight, and that systemic racism is the cancer of this country, and that violence is just one of its many insidious symptoms. And in order to alleviate it, again, we have to think holistically.
Tony Salam, this is something that you work in, every day as well. And after a weekend like the one that we've just had, you have to keep going, of course. How do you maintain, the optimism that you can create change when you're confronted with what we saw this weekend?
Well, first of all, it's always a very saddening and dark occasion when you hear about 100 and some individuals being shot over a holiday weekend and children being murdered, etc. So what I do is I take some personal satisfaction in terms of understanding that we have people on the ground that's doing this work, people who have committed themselves and dedicated themselves to put their life on the line in order to have our communities safe. And so I'm very excited to be a part of this particular initiative. However, it's saddening me that we have to go through this as a community, as a Black and brown community. And so my desire and my goals is to continue to work in this space because it's necessary for everybody, not only just the police department, but this is a collective effort, a collaborative effort between all the organizations and citizens and community members to do something about this pandemic. It is
one of those, sorry, I just want to get Brenda Palms-Barber in here because, we just heard Liz Dozier talk about investing in, our community organizations and programming. What kind of a difference could you make with a significantly scaled up program? How many more people could you reach?
Hi, Candace. I'm sorry, Brandis. I think that's for me. I think that we're actually right now in play. There are a number of violence reduction programs and initiatives that are each doing incredible and impactful work, but we're actually operating much more at a boutique kind of level of impact. And what's exciting to me is that we're all coming together to say, how can we have significant population impact in reducing violence throughout the city of Chicago? And I think that we all have interesting different methodologies, but we all share the same vision and hope, which is that these young men that we're working with can in fact be what all of us want to be, which is a good citizen. And I think that what we're trying to get to here is the root causes behind this violence. And I think we can't simply police ourselves out of this. It's just impossible to say that, policing is the answer, because it's not, nor is just a single job the answer. Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, just give a person a job and that, that's the best antidote to a bullet. But in fact, what we've learned through Chicago Ready and through some of our other partners in this work is that it is a very complex and sophisticated set of issues. And in my personal opinion, really the root of this is poverty. When you live in communities where there are not enough resources and not enough options, then people are left to make poor choices. We've also learned that unidentified and untreated mental health issues are rampant in the populations that we serve, whether it's a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, but that those folks are not accessing the kind of mental health support that they need. Substance abuse is a substitute for treating some of those challenges.
You talk about the complex, you talk about the complex web of issues, and some might say lack of education is one of those. Liz Dozier, as a former school principal, how much can we expect schools and the education system to be able to help to address these issues?
Well, I just want to back us up, Brandon, because I think we do this too often. I think we problematize our communities. We problematize Black people, brown people, and we try to like go out and solve those individuals or solve Black people or brown people. And really to truly alleviate violence, we have to look at what's happening in our communities from a holistic perspective. The systems that were supposed to provide a quality education, healthy income, rehabilitation, they have all consistently failed. And we can tie those back to systemic racism. And so, for decades, Chicago has neglected the health and prosperity of the South and West Sides. At every level of government, we have either explicitly facilitated or we've ignored the exploitation of Black and brown communities. And while, banks and other key institutions have honestly done the same. And so at Chicago Beyond, what we believe is that those same institutions that have participated in that have now had this incredible responsibility. And that's what I mean by all of us have to do better. They have this incredible responsibility to build these communities back and to build them back in a holistic way. And so whether it's, we think about JP Morgan and, investing, 41 times more in white neighborhoods as opposed to in Black neighborhoods, or we think about, 37% of Chicago's young Black adults are unemployed compared to 5.7% of white adults. There's a whole bunch of things we need to do. It's not just about police. It's not about any one institution. And so Chicago Beyond, again, we believe in holistic healing. We believe in this whole approach of not just any one singular issue.
And before we run out of time, Tony Salam, you and the host of people that work with you at Ready at Heartland Alliance, you've been able to achieve some results in reducing violence. Very briefly, so 20 seconds, I apologize. How have you been able to do that?
Well, we have identified the most highest risk individuals. Since the program launched, we have served over 800 individuals connected to programming. Our participants are 45 times more likely to be murdered or shot by, so also 80% of our participants has been experienced the violence. 35% of them are at least been shot one time. So we provide CBT, cognitive behavior intervention, transitional employment, case management, and wraparound services. And so like Liz was talking about, a holistic approach.
Sorry, Tony, that is where we'll actually have to leave it, but we're thankful to have spoken to you and Eddie Bocanegra and others at Ready, and done more, of course, with our firsthand gun violence series that is available online. But we'll have to leave it there for now. My thanks to Liz Dozier, Tony Salam, and Brenda Palms-Barber for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
And now back to Paris for a look at concerns over Chicago's condo buildings following the tragedy in South Florida. Paris.
Brandon's crews are still working to locate residents who aren't accounted for after the deadly condo collapse in Surfside, Florida. The latest reported death toll is now 36 people. And the tragedy has prompted quick action in nearby cities, including the evacuation of a building in North Miami Beach, whose city manager says they're working diligently to protect residents through building inspections.
You can't do them fast enough for us. Everybody is afraid in the time of the wake of what happened at Surfside. So we're doing our best, and our building department is working diligently to review all buildings and make sure we're keeping all of our residents safe.
And the collapse of the Surfside condo has left some wondering, could it happen here? And what sorts of inspections do Chicago condo buildings face? Joining us to answer all those questions and more are Evan McKenzie, law school instructor and head of the political science department at UIC, and the author of 2 books on condo and HOA governance. Attorney Chris Caston, who practices community association law, including with condo and HOA associations. And Derek Belt, president of the Structural Engineers Association of Illinois. We also invited the city's Department of Buildings, who said they aren't providing specific comment on the collapse since there are still so many unknowns. And in a statement, the department touted Chicago's strict building codes, saying, quote, All plans for high-rise development undergo multiple reviews from all relevant disciplines, especially structural, to help ensure long-term safety. As for the protection, owners must obtain a certificate of occupancy, which has its own set of requirements prior to allowing any occupants in the building. All right. So that's from the Department of Buildings, and we welcome all of you here to this discussion. Derek Belt, first question for you. Chicago has hundreds and hundreds of high-rise condo and apartment buildings, many that abut the water, just like in Surfside or Miami Beach. Could something like this happen here?
Short answer, no. It's really such a extremely rare event that, you know, the number of variables involved that would have to go wrong in order for something like that to happen is just almost unthinkable. It's so extremely rare. And you know, I should step back for a second and really just say how tragic of an event this is and how sad I am. And I'm sure I speak for all of the structural engineers in Illinois, just saying that this is really sad. And, you know, we work our entire careers trying to keep these things from happening. And it's really shocking and sad for us.
And certainly it is a rare event, underscored by the fact that you just never hear about this, which is why this is such a big news story. Chris, the Department of Buildings mentioned the strict building code. Just give us a little bit more about that building code and how well enforced and inspected that it is.
Well, there's a lot. The building code in Chicago covers a whole bunch of different things, including new construction. And with respect to condos, you know, new construction of condos, condo conversion, and just general construction of buildings, and all that applies to condos also. On an ongoing type of situation, I said the city requires inspections of facades for buildings that are greater than 80 feet tall. And there's different categories and requirements for types of inspections of the facades. There's requirements for inspections of exterior metal components, you know, fire escapes, antennas, the supports for a water tower, you know, things that are exterior and subject to some sort of deterioration. So there are some mandatory requirements in the code. Then there's just a variety of ordinances that impact, you know, and it applies to buildings of all sizes with respect to the condition of the bricks and mortar, you know, even like, you know, how the windows are, painting, of course, since we're in Chicago, of course, the porches. So there's just
a lot of layers of protection. Yeah. Evan McKenzie, condo associations, another layer of protection here if you live in a condo building. How important are they to making sure that the building is maintained and up to standards?
Very important, because, you know, you can start out with a building that passes every inspection. I mean, this Surfside building is 40 years old, and I suspect that, you know, it had passed inspection at the time of initial construction and probably, you know, at many points along the way. But condo buildings have to be maintained like any other building, and that responsibility falls on the board of directors of the condo association, and the expenses have to be borne by the owners, the unit owners, who pay assessments every month. And part of that assessment every month is supposed to be put in a reserve fund and set aside for eventual repair and replacement of major building components. And sometimes the issue is, as I think is part of the picture in the Surfside case, is that they don't set aside enough money methodically over the years. And so when the decade arrives, you know, where they have the real problem, they look in the, you know, in the piggy bank and there isn't enough there. And then you have a huge argument over having to pay for the whole thing at once using special assessments, and that's really backbreaking.
So, Evan, I want to stick with you on this then. What's the situation financially for condo associations in Illinois or in Chicago? Because, as you say, these are common things that are debated at board meetings. Should we increase our assessment? Should we put in a special assessment? What is the financial situation?
Well, I think the general consensus of most people who have studied reserve funds is that, you know, at least a third of condo associations really don't have enough in the bank, and it could be more than that. It could be substantially more. The law in Illinois does not really mandate exactly how much they're supposed to set aside for reserves. It says they should have reasonable reserves, and it tells them all the things they can take into consideration, but they aren't actually required to go out and hire a professional, someone like Derek or someone, to go out and actually inspect the building and do a full reserve study and tell them how much they should be setting aside. And that is, in my view, where, we need some reform. We ought to have these condo boards should be bringing in professionals to evaluate the building every few years and tell them where they stand and what they should be setting aside.
Some kind of oversight and management. So Derek, then to you, exactly. What are the issues that you do run up against when you inspect a lot of these buildings?
Yeah, I mean, there's, I guess, to a couple of points that were already made. As you can tell, the majority of the issues that arise really come from elements of your building that are exposed to the outside elements, the wind and the snow and the freeze-thaw cycles and the salt spray and whatnot. And that's, really where a lot of the deterioration comes from. The inside of your building is pretty rare for it, especially in the high rises, to deteriorate. But salt spray in a parking garage or freeze-thaw cycle on an old masonry facade, those are definitely things that should be maintained. And with any maintenance, just even like a single family home, the sooner you fix those little issues as they arise, the easier it is to pay for that. It's cheaper the earlier you do it. The longer you wait, the more significant it gets, the more costly it gets. So
and Chris,
if you're doing them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, and Chris Kazin, I want to follow up with you just very quickly. We only have a few seconds, but as someone that does legally advise homeowners associations, what is your interaction like with these associations?
Well, I mean, best practices, even though, as Evan indicated, the law in Illinois doesn't require reserve studies, but best practices would be to have a reserve study done. So, if I'm asked about that from a client, that's what I would advise them to do. Or if they haven't updated it for a while, they should update it so that they have an idea of the useful life expectancy of the components and significant components of the building, so that they can, appropriately provide for repair and replacement of those component parts in the future.
All right, a lot of interesting things to discuss here, especially given the fact that so many Chicagoans do live in high rises and condo buildings. And our thanks to Evan McKenzie, Chris Kasten, and Derek Belt. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
And up next, we go on a walking tour through a cemetery to hear the stories of some prominent Black Chicagoans. So please stay with us.
It really is about community where we all come together.
Chicago needs to make space for everyone.
And there's much more ahead on the program, including whether the Chicago Bears will migrate to the northern suburbs after a bid to purchase Arlington International Racecourse. But first, a Chicago Architecture Center walking tour takes us to the headstones and mausoleums of some of Chicago's most influential activists, politicians, and entrepreneurs who shaped history in the first 155 years since the first Juneteenth. For many Chicagoans, the Bishop Ford is just a bustling freeway through the South Side. But the man it's named for, Bishop Lewis Henry Ford.
He was the eulogist at the funeral of Emmett Till.
A funeral that would galvanize the civil rights movement on that fateful day in 1955, after Till was lynched in Mississippi.
The pictures of his corpse were then published in John Johnson's Ebony and Jet for the whole world to see, and every African American in the country was able to see what had happened.
Today, both Johnson and Ford lie in rest just next to each other inside Oakwood Cemetery in the Greater Grand Crossing community. Their final resting place is shared with so many other Chicagoans who helped write the city's and the country's history. The Chicago Architecture Center's walking tour of Oakwood Cemetery, called Civil War to Civil Rights, traces history through the people buried here. Among them, more than 4,000 Confederate military prisoners in a mass grave.
We begin at the Confederate mound, but that's not where we end. That's the end of the Civil War. And then we move into Reconstruction, the Great Migration, and the modern civil rights movement. And all the people here that were involved in all of that difficult transition for our country.
Another theme that is a part of the tour when we talk about Reconstruction is that people often have the feeling that history is always about progress. You're always moving forward, things are always getting better. But what we see in some examples on this tour is that there's often a lot of regression.
Erica Miles is one of the docents for this tour, along with Mary Jo Hogue, who wrote it. During the tours, they explained to visitors the significance of Chicago's first black mayor, Harold Washington.
He was elected mayor in 1983, and unfortunately he passed in 1987. But if you look at what he was able to do in that span of time, it's pretty amazing.
And anti-lynching crusader and journalist Ida B. Wells.
It was, just amazing to me to learn about what she did, the time that she did it, how very dangerous it was, and how significant it was in terms of raising the awareness of what was happening to African Americans.
Also buried here, Olympic great Jesse Owens, who beat Hitler's Nazis in track and field at the 1936 Olympics. Miles explains history, dates, and places are important, but what she really hopes visitors can sense is the context of the time period.
We tend to mythologize these people. We tend to make them larger than life, and we say, well, they were able to accomplish this because they were this, super human person, but that's often not the case. It's often just regular people who are rising to the challenge.
Other notables buried at Oak Woods include social services advocate Ada S. McKinley and Negro League baseball icon Ted Double Duty Radcliffe. Also buried there, 19th century U.S. Senator from Illinois Lyman Trumbull, who wrote the 13th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, and the Freedmen's Bureau Act. The Chicago Architecture Center is offering the Civil War to Civil Rights Tour in additional 4 dates this year, the next of which is this Friday, July 9th. You can visit our website to learn more. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, the Chicago Bears are seriously bidding to buy the plot where Arlington Park has been for decades, what the sale could mean for the Chicago area. The incoming president of Illinois Tech on Chicago's status as an innovation hub, diversifying big tech and community engagement. And what does it mean to be an American? 3 local Latinos share their feelings of pride and concerns about cultural erasure. But first, some more of today's top stories. Chicago public school students are still weeks away from returning to in-person full-time classes, but the Chicago Teachers Union and the district are already back at the bargaining table over how to reopen schools. The union is asking the district to reopen the letter that the two sides agreed to back in the winter, this time asking CPS to commit to a goal of vaccinating 80% of students ages 12 and over by October 1st, and 80% of younger students within 60 days of authorization of the vaccine for that age group. The union is also asking for increases in funding for more positions, including counselors, nurses, and certain teachers. Young athletes, a brand new state-of-the-art facility to work out at Gately Park in the Pullman neighborhood. Chicago Park District Board President Avis Lavelle recalled what it was like growing up as an athlete in Chicago.
We never expected to have anything like this, and despite all those shortcomings, look at the incredible world-class athletes that came out of Chicago. People like Jesse Owens and Ralph Metcalf and Elsie and Conrad. I'm choked up about this because you think about all the kids who could have been here but didn't have the opportunity. So let me just say to you, this is a tremendous investment in our youth.
The nearly 140,000 square foot facility houses not only a new space for after-school matters, but also an indoor space for track and field. It includes the state's first hydraulically banked Olympic-grade running track, which puts Chicago in the running for collegiate and international competitions. The $53.6 million facility now houses a third of after-school matters spaces, the third, for Chicago teens, featuring dance studios, recording rooms, and a culinary kitchen, and much more. And now to Paris for details of a major bid for a local 326-acre property. Paris.
Yeah, Brandis, the Chicago Bears bid for Arlington International Racecourse has odds makers in a bind. Is it a bluff, or are the Bears really considering leaving Chicago? Plus, there are other dark horses in the race to buy that site. And here's what Mayor Lori Lightfoot, a Bears season ticket holder herself, had to say about all of it.
Frankly, I'm not sure exactly what they want, but we are open to the conversation. I think it's important. I say this as much as the mayor, but also as a 20-plus year season ticket holder of the Chicago Bears, that there is some interest in improving the fan experience at Soldier Field, in them being able to maximize the profitability of the stadium, and I'm totally supportive of that.
And joining us are Alan Sanderson, a sports economist at the University of Chicago. He's written on the economic impact of big-ticket events like the Olympics, Super Bowl games, and sports facilities. And Mark Gannis, president of sports business consulting firm Sports Corp. He's also a sports facility specialist and worked on the sale of the Cubs from the Tribune Company to the Ricketts family, among many other projects. Good to see both of you again. I know you can't see me there on Zoom, but welcome back. And I'll start with you, Mark. So this Bears bid for that Arlington Park land, in your eyes, is this a bluff to get more out of the city, or could they really leave Chicago?
I think this is very serious. This is not a bluff. The Bears have been looking for decades, if people remember, in various suburban locations. They purchased an option on some farmland in the western suburbs. They looked at Gary, Indiana. They looked at Arlington Park years ago. This is something the Bears are taking, I believe, very seriously. It's something I think they'd like to do. I do not see this as a bluff. I don't see this as just to gain negotiating leverage with the city. If you look at where these NFL stadiums are going, what they need to be for future generations, you need a lot of land, you need a lot of programmatic space, and you need a building that can be expanded as needed. So you can't really do that at Soldier Field. You can't do that at Soldier Field. So one way or another, you'd have to look for a new facility, a new stadium. Is that possible that it's in the city of Chicago? Of course, it's possible.
And
Arlington Park seems quite likely.
And Ellen Sanderson, the mayor, says she's willing to work on improving the stadium experience and profitability of Soldier Field. What needs to be done to make those things happen at that site in Soldier Field to keep it attractive for the Bears to stay there?
Well, the Bears made a mistake 20 years ago when there are other places they could have gone, and there's renovations that could have been done. It's maybe the worst stadium in the NFL, and it's the Bears' fault. Okay, I look at a little bit as the old joke of the kid who kills his parents and then asks for mercy from the court because he's an orphan. The Bears did this to themselves. The other issue here is, one way or another, it's $1 billion. If there's a new facility somewhere. And the question is not just, are the Bears going to Arlington Heights, or are they going to someplace else in the city, but who's going to pony up the $1 billion? Certainly Arlington Heights, I don't think, wants to pay that. The city doesn't want to pay much, and the Bears don't. So you're going to have to find somebody who wants to.
Well, one of the ways they
pay a lot of money. And let me add one other thing, too, is that one of the things that's happened over time, not just in the NFL, but sports in general over the last 30 years, 40 years, television has changed dramatically. Most of the Bears' revenue, most of any NFL team's revenue, comes from television. It's a much better experience, unless you're on the 50-yard line, to watch the game at home when you're warm and beer is only $1 instead of 10. And so in some ways, it doesn't much matter where they play because their revenues are going to come from television, not from gate receipts.
And Mark Gannis, the Bears are stuck in a lease at Soldier Field till 2033 until all the debt is paid off by the Illinois Sports Facility Authority. Can they break that lease early? Would it be cost effective to pay a penalty to break that lease to move sooner if that's what they want to do?
Well, there are some provisions in the lease that allow for some fees to be paid potentially for early termination. But this is not a short-term proposition by the Bears. It usually takes 5 to 7 years from inception until you open the doors anyway. 2033 is only 12 years away. So you're looking at maybe a 5 or 6 year delta in there. They could work, if they decide to go there, the best deal the city could do is to negotiate a way for them to buy out of the lease early so the city could use that money for other purposes if it comes to that point.
You know, Ellen Sanderson, there's been a private developer talking about a massive development over the train tracks just west of Soldier Field. It'd be a transit hub. It would house Bears Hall of Fame, other game day experiences. Is that the kind of thing that, were it to be approved with public funding, that would sweeten the pot to keep the Bears at Soldier Field, even though you're saying most of the money comes from TV?
Well, the issue is that there are two things that you do not want to build on a valuable piece of real estate, and Soldier Field is a valuable piece of real estate. One is a cemetery, and the other is a NFL stadium. Football stadiums are economic losers for their communities. Okay? Their utilization rate is so low compared to any other facility. Now, could the Bears make a go of it financially? Would it be a profitable, a good investment? No. Okay, that's just a football stadium, no matter where it is. That's not going to happen. Also, I shouldn't say this as a Southsider, but the Chicago Cubs are the only of our major franchises in town that have a positive economic impact on the city. Everybody inside Soldier Field to watch a Bears game is from Chicago. The same for the Blackhawks, the Bulls, and my White Sox. That they're spending the money there in 3 hours of their time, $100 instead of at the mall or a concert or restaurant or something else. The Cubs draw significantly from outside the city, so they bring money in. Football just doesn't.
So you're saying it's not bringing people from outside the city. It might not be a loss economically for Chicago if the Bears were to leave. Very quickly, Mark Gannis, because we are out of time, but would it be a loss of fans if the Bears were no longer to call their home Soldier Field in Chicago, or would fans get over it?
Oh, there wouldn't be a loss of fans. As Alan said, they watch on television primarily, and the ones that go to the games, it's about 60,000 per game, smallest stadium in the NFL right now, by the way. You may get a change in the mix of the people at the games, but you'll still sell out the stadium even if you added 10 or 15,000 seats. So no loss at all of any fans.
All right. Well, it's a fascinating discussion, and we do have an invite out to Bears chairman George McCaskey. We want to discuss this with him and other things about the franchise. And our thanks right now to Alan Sanderson and Mark Gannis. Thanks so much for joining us.
Take care, Paris.
You too. And now to Brandis for a one-on-one with the new leader of a local university. Brandis.
Paris, thank you. The Illinois Institute of Technology has a new president starting in August. The research university has selected Raj Echambati to lead the Bronzeville-based institution. The move comes as Chicago strives to bolster its local tech industry as the city emerges from the pandemic while grappling with ongoing questions of equity and community engagement. And Raj Echambati joins us now. Welcome to Chicago tonight, and congratulations on the new position. You're coming to Chicago from Northeastern University in Boston. What was it that attracted you to Illinois Tech and to the city of Chicago?
Thank you, Brandis. Thank you for this opportunity. This is kind of a homecoming of sorts for our family. I used to be at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign for a decade, and then I moved to Northeastern, so it's coming back home, if you will. But when I looked at this job opportunity, I went back to the founding mission that was set in 1890 by Reverend Gonzalez, who talked about educating students of all backgrounds in order to make them impactful leaders for the industrial era. And I felt that mission was very relevant today with the breakthrough technologies taking over the world, etc. And somebody told me recently, Brandis, that when you are in a leadership position, you are first and foremost the keepers of the ember of the organization. Go back to the origin. And to me, that founding vision of providing affordable and accessible education to all is what attracted me to Illinois Tech.
What role do you see Illinois Tech playing in the greater higher education layout in Chicago now and in the future?
Yeah, Illinois Tech, as you know, is the only technologically oriented institution in Chicago, and therefore it has a very vital role to play with breakthrough technologies changing the way we work, we live, we learn. Technology is going to become extremely important. So advancing technology for all so that we have an equitable world is going to be a very important mission for Illinois Tech going into the future.
Big tech companies, they tend to have a pretty abysmal record when it comes to diversity and inclusion. What do you think institutions like Illinois Tech can do to improve on that?
This is a great question, Brandis. In fact, if you were to catch me in an elevator and ask me what should Illinois Tech be for the next century, I would say it is fundamentally about technology and equity. Last year with COVID, we have seen tremendous issues come to the front. We have had, in terms of entrepreneurship, 40% of Black-owned businesses, or 32% of Latinx-owned businesses, 25% of women-owned businesses go out of business last year, 26% of Asian-owned businesses, and so on. Close to 2 million women have actually slowed down or gotten out of the workforce. These are serious issues for us in the long run in terms of an equitable society. So our job at Illinois Tech has got to be about educating leaders of diverse backgrounds, be it women, be it people of color, be it racial, ethnic minorities, or differently abled, and then provide that talent pipeline of technologically oriented, educated individuals to the big tech companies, if you will. So that is a responsibility that we take very seriously. And it is not just about access. It is also about two other things. It is about building experiences when they are in the Illinois Tech system, providing the right kind of infrastructure so that students of all backgrounds can be successful and can develop into impactful leaders once they go into the world. And last but not the least, a lot of people tell me universities, and especially Illinois Tech, should mirror the world. I personally think, yes, we should mirror the world, but we should also exemplify what a just and equitable world will look like for these students. So these are three major roles I think we should play at Illinois Tech in order to provide the talent required for the tech companies so that in the long run, we have a just and equitable world.
And we're almost out of time, but before I let you go, Illinois Tech is, of course, located in the Bronzeville neighborhood on the south side. Has the university done enough to engage with community stakeholders and residents, or what more do you think could be done? In a few seconds.
I always believe that there are still miles to go before we sleep, right? So to me, while there have been interesting collaborative opportunities with Bronzeville, we need to do more. And this is about engaging with the Bronzeville community and listening to their needs and, offering what Illinois Tech can do. And it has got to be a win-win situation for both parties, if you will. And if you ask me, this is one of the important things in my agenda, to connect with the community, civic, and religious leaders of Bronzeville, to hear them out, listen to them, and to more importantly, ensure that this relationship is symbiotic and benefits both parties. And without a strong Illinois Tech within a stronger Bronzeville, it is of no use in the long run. Therefore, I look forward to a very strong relationship with Bronzeville.
Something you'll get started on in August when you begin your new job. Raj Ijambadi, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Brandis.
Up next, how some in Chicago's Latino community view their own patriotism. That's a conversation originally aired on Saturday's Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, hosted by Univision's Alex Hernandez. But first, a look at the weather.
Chicago recently welcomed 175 new Americans as they took the oath of allegiance to the United States at Wrigley Field. Here's the moment when they became citizens.
By the authority vested in this court, I hereby declare you to be citizens of the United States of America. Congratulations.
But for many Latinos, both American-born and immigrants, feelings of pride and patriotism for the United States are complicated by history, racial injustice, and cultural erasure, leading to questions of what it truly means to be an American patriot. Joining us with more are Anjine Galvan Rodriguez, educator and Afro-Latina blogger, Marcos Torres, U.S. Army veteran and commander of the American Legion Post 939, and Moises Hernandez, immigration attorney and vice president of the board of directors of Latinos Progresando. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. I want to start with you, Moises. You're an immigration attorney and yourself an immigrant to the U.S. What do you hear from the people you work with about their feelings of patriotism for the U.S.?
First, I think many of the people I've encountered, they distinguish between policies or rhetoric that may be anti-immigrant or negative from the ideals of this country. It's espoused foundational ideals of opportunity for all, of freedom, of all of us being equal under the law. So I think in that way, immigrants kind of rejuvenate and call this country to live up to those foundational ideals. And I think people are smart. People distinguish bad behavior from ideals. So I think that many of the people that I talk to don't see that as a contradiction. They love this country, they're grateful to this country, and they can distinguish that from some of the negative noise, which has been very loud in recent years, right?
Antine, you're also an immigrant to the U.S. Would you say that your experience makes your relationship with the idea of American patriotism different from those who were born here?
I think so. I think, to me, patriotism is having respect and appreciation to the land you call home. And home for me is different spaces. It's Dominican Republic because I was born there. It's Puerto Rico. I was raised there till I was 9, and then I came to Chicago. So I really respect and appreciate all those different countries for the beauty that they have in their history as well as the flaws that they have in their history.
Marcos, you're a Chicago native and U.S. Army veteran. What does patriotism mean to you?
Patriotism to me means not only to have love for one's country, but also the innate desire to fight and defend it, whether it be civically or on a national level, whether it be serving the military, things of that nature. If you are a patriot, you not only love your country, but you want to serve your country and uphold your country's values.
Moises, in Chicago, we have many neighborhoods and celebrations of Latino cultures like Mexican Independence Day and Puerto Rican Day parades. Do you think that those celebrations show that immigrants don't think of themselves as Americans first?
No, not at all. I think the history of this country has always been new groups arriving, committing, and establishing deep roots in this country, but being very proud and jealous of their cultural traditions, their food, their language, their stories. And I think that's part and parcel of the American experience. I think the idea that love of one's cultural heritage, of the places one comes from, is somehow diminishes your capacity to love the United States is frankly nonsense. That has always been, and that same suspicion or accusation has been leveled against people who've come to this country of Jewish descent, Irish Catholics, every Mediterranean Europeans. So I don't think that holds any water as an argument. People can love their culture and show their affection for the places they come from and those traditions and language, and doesn't diminish the immigrants' obligations or love of this country. Look at the rates at which immigrants enroll in the military, in which they buy homes, in which they establish businesses in this country. So I don't think those are at all in conflict in any way. We are, and going to what was said earlier, and our education, right, I think it teaches us to appreciate both of those realities.
Marcos, you chartered a new American Legion post for Latino veterans, which we covered actually here on Latino Voices last month, because you felt like you didn't see patriotism in your community. Do you think it's important for Latino Americans to feel patriotic?
I think it's extremely important because given, as was spoken of Moises, the different political climates that have been in our country, given what happened after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, it's extremely important that we feel patriotic because we must take ownership, because this is our home. This is our country. Este es mi país. And I think that it's important that we also let the rest of the country know that, hey, we are here, and este país de nosotros. This is our country.
Thank you for that. And Jeannie, do you think schools should teach children about the history of race and racism in America's history?
Absolutely. I think that that's how you grow. Patriotism is part of this relationship. It's kind of like a relationship in the sense that you love and you care, but you also have to appreciate the flaws of that relationship so that you could have that relationship evolve, right? So within the classroom, there are many ways that definitely we could have our students appreciate the country that we have and the opportunities that it provides for those that live here, but also learn from the mistakes that we've made as a country in the past, right? And how do we teach our children to do better so that they don't make the same mistakes that people in the past have made? Right, because the whole purpose of a community is to move the community forward, right? To move our society forward, to move this country forward. So part of that is also sharing and helping students understand the mistakes or the flaws that our history has, right. But also the beauty.
Happy 4th of July to the three of you, and thank you for joining us this evening. Anjanae Galvan Rodriguez, Marcos Torres, and Moises Hernandez. Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you.
Back to wrap things up right after this.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night.
Please join us tomorrow night live at 7.
Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.